Get ready for Solomon's Porch Podcast. Hey, giving the glory to God. Yeah, you're hanging with Jason and Shawn. Get ready for Solomon's.
Yeah.
Because they don't need word for word because they're not studying for theological discussions. Now, I do feel like if you are studying to teach the Bible, if you're studying to form your theology from a full biblical context, for understanding apologetics, stuff like that, like the word for word is important.
Yeah.
But not everybody needs a word for word, and that's why, like, people say KJV only. I'm like, what are you using KJV for? First of all, there's a lot of phrases in there that are inaccurate. There are a lot of words, translations that are just inaccurate. And, they use newer forms of Greek where other translations use older forms of Greek.
Actual period times of Greek.
Right. And so that's kind of one of the things there with the KJV. Not saying it's inaccurate and everything, but there's a lot of words that I feel like it doesn't do justice.
Well, and then there's suspicion about the purpose and context of why it was translated. So
which was
the King of England at the time decided that there needed to be an interpretation or a translation that the common people could understand. At least that's how it comes off as. But then there's a lot of suspicion that there was some of the changes that were made were by his hand. So in other words, he said, well, I feel like we need to make sure that we're saying this as opposed to this because it suited his agendas.
So it was his interpretation that was forced into the translation.
Right. So it wouldn't be much different than if Trump said, okay, well, we're going to give a new translation of the Bible. And by the way, in there, it's going to, say Russia is awesome and beautiful people. And, it's okay to hate people or whatever. I don't know. Just,
so it's like about great big walls in heaven.
Yeah. Lots of walls separating,
like
races of people.
God put a wall up.
So it would be not too dissimilar from that. So
right.
He had an agenda. Now, do most people have an agenda? Well, yeah, they all have an agenda. But what is that agenda? If your agenda is to be able to try to give the most accurate interpretation as possible, then that's a different story. I feel like the Message Bible, especially the Message Remix, personally, it falls on this scale that we have here in front of us. It falls way over to the right of paraphrase, and it is. I would never recommend this as a Bible to regularly study by. I have given the Message Remix to new believers, and specifically to not very well-educated teenagers who, one, just struggle to read in general, who didn't do well in school, but wanted something more than, say, like a comic book Bible. So, or something more than Bible, man, or VeggieTales. Look, man, I love me some VeggieTales.
Well, VeggieTales is for rich folk anyway. I don't think poor people know what VeggieTales is.
Yeah. Well, no, they knew what VeggieTales was, but that's what their little sisters, were watching and stuff, so they couldn't watch that. And so it served a purpose of being able to get these students reading the Word, to understanding the concepts. But, when they sat in church, they weren't paying attention anyway. They weren't looking in their Bibles. They weren't referencing it. When I sat with them in Sunday school, we'd pull it out and we would read whole sections because it doesn't really break it up verse by verse the way that most
like a regular book.
Yeah. So it
that way it's more like
the
original text.
And in a lot of ways it is, yeah. And so we would break it up that way. So it was far more topical, and that's what they needed. They needed topical because they're in high school, they're boys, and they're just trying to figure out what's going on with them in their lives, and what does that have to do with God, and what do I have to do with God? And so honestly, that translation, that interpretation, I would say is more accurate, was far more appropriate for those folks.
Gotcha.
wouldn't sit there and study it myself. I still own one because I had it from when I was teaching the class. But it certainly isn't for everyone.
So I just want to kind of read down before we end this the different, like what each translation, what category it fits. So we'll go word for word is the Interlinear, the New American Standard Bible, the Amplified Bible, English Standard Version, the Revised Standard Version, revised, King James Version, New King James Version, Thought for Thought, Holman Christian Standard Bible, New Revised Standard Version, New American Bible, New Jerusalem Bible, New International Version, Today's New International Version, the New Century Version, New Living Translation. And then the paraphrase, New International Reader's Version, the Good News Translation, which is also the Good News Bible, Contemporary English Version, the Living Bible, and the Message. So
Actually, yeah, I've known a lot of people to use the Living Bible as well.
yeah, I've seen that a lot.
Yeah, it seemed like it was more older folks, I think, though, that I knew of that were using it. Like my grandparents, they grew up with King James, and that's what they were taught on. That's what it was preached on. But when they were reading at home for themselves, they were usually reading like the Living Bible.
Gotcha. All right, so yeah, I mean, let us know your thoughts. What's your favorite version? What do you think is more important in terms of reading the Bible for yourself personally? We have a lot of people who are just trying to figure out how to read the Bible. I mean, like they're just trying to figure out, okay, if I open this Bible, where do I turn to? What's the most important books? Like, how do I understand what's being said? And so I do respect Thought for Thought paraphrase in that it helps people to try to understand what's being said. So I think it's better for them to get that than nothing at all. I heard one pastor say he was answering a child or something, and they asked him, they said, well, what do you think is the more important or the best version of the Bible or whatever? Are there any versions you would not use? Questions like that. And he said, essentially, the way I feel is if you have a translation that points people to Christ for salvation, then that is that is acceptable. And so, and that's a very broad generalization. That might not necessarily work for discipleship purposes or things like that, because there might be different views on different things. But the most important thing is making sure that people see that Christ is the way to get to the Father and to be reconciled and saved from our sin.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important thing. So,
well, I've always actually used the analogy of screwdrivers. I don't own just one screwdriver. I have Phillips, I have flat, and then I've also got different sizes and different lengths.
Well, sometimes you can use a hammer to bang in a nail.
And that might be a paraphrase.
All right. We'll be back. We'll be back next time.